Now, of course, you cannot come to the Chelsea Flower Show without taking a stroll through the floral marquee. And let me tell you, child, there are some sights to be seen in here.
Now, the first thing that caught my eye when I walked into the pavilion were these fish. And let me tell you, koi carp of this size, they do not come cheap. I would love for you to put some guesses for the prices of each one of these fish down below in the comments, because I'm thinking it's upwards of at least £1,000 each. Incredible. And just look how crystal clear the water is as well.
You guys know how much I love petunias. I will find a way to get them into every single one of my designs. So imagine my surprise to be here at the Chelsea Flower Show to find a resurgence in the petunias.
Please tell me that I'm not alone with my love of petunias. If you like petunias, give this video a like, or at least let me know in the comments so that I don't feel ashamed. For me, petunias are really awesome for my pollinators on my balcony, because actually my number one pollinators are flies. So these guys are perfect for me. The first garden that we're going to look at today is called the Pulp Friction Growing Skills Garden. This is an edible garden and it features reclaimed or recycled local materials, and it's concrete and cement free, and all elements are to be either relocated or reused by Pulp Friction after the show. The planting is designed around the concept of a forest garden. It's inspired by the largest remaining remnant of Sherwood Forest, the area that Pulp Friction, the charity, calls home. After the show, the garden's going to be relocated to Stockhill Fire Station in Nottingham, where it will be used as a safe, welcoming space that the local communities and firefighters suffering from psychological stress will be able to unwind. And it looks like I wasn't the only person who found this garden really interesting, because Uncle Monty and Joe were on the garden as well. It's no wonder that this garden won People's Choice. With the cost of living crisis, it was so amazing to see in the pavilion just how many exhibitors decided to use containers to grow food. In a show first, the RHS partnered up with UBS to create this beautiful exhibit, which was an immersive walkthrough feature garden which gave visitors an insight into a grower's daily life. It showcased the work that goes into growing the award-winning plants on display at the world's most famous flower show and their other gardens. The exhibit was designed by Emma Tipping, and it also featured contributions from 4 nurseries: She Grows Veg, Kent Wildflower Seeds, the Cady Brothers, and also Kitchen Garden Plant Centre. Now, speaking of nurseries, I thought since we were in the pavilion, it would be really great to get an understanding from some of the nurseries to find out what it takes to make a display here at Chelsea.
Now, if there's a word about me, you know how much I absolutely love water features. And right now we are standing on a water feature which is designed by Lincolnshire Pond plants. And those of you who already have one of my container ponds, you'll be very, very familiar with Lincolnshire Pond plants, as this is the nursery that supplies my plants. Now, over the past year or so, I've been documenting their success with their show garden features. And I thought I would give you a sneak peek at the behind the scenes and how a nursery, an aquatic nursery, operates.
We're starting off today in the delightful seaside town of Cleethorpes. I'm going to take a train from Cleethorpes all the way through Grimsby town over to Market Raisin, or Raisin. I don't know how you pronounce it. My destination is Lincolnshire Pond plants. I didn't particularly know what to expect, but it wasn't this. It's awesome.
I'm Dawn Fisher from Lincolnshire Pond.
I've been to your nursery around about 12 months or so ago, and I had the pleasure of walking around, and it is not small at all. How did the nursery even come to be?
So we're on a 15-acre site. We've gone from a small warehouse where we had a little bit of outside work. Now we're on 15 acres with 15 greenhouses.
And it's in an RAF base, is that right?
Old RAF base, and we've converted old Nissan plots into greenhouses.
And it's not just one or two plants that you sell there. I believe you've got quite the variety.
So we have about 350 different varieties. My son started this by clearing a lake for somebody and thought he could sell a few bunches online to maybe take the kids on holiday or a treat. And it absolutely snowballed. And then I ended up going and working for him at about 4 o'clock in the morning, then going and teaching all day and then coming back home again. So then I ended up giving up work and going and working for him.
And then all of a sudden it's turned into 15 acres.
15 acres.
Trust me to pick today where we are going through a storm. I think it's called Storm Norma, and the winds are tremendous.
Now, I was here to select the ponds that were going to feature in my container ponds, which are now available on my website. However, Dawn was in the process of working out what plants she was going to be using for her show gardens through 2023.
The guys here at Lincolnshire Pond Plants, they grow almost 80% of everything from seed or from propagations. So I'm on my way over to the nursery to go and have a look and see what they've been growing.
To be honest, I don't really know what I was expecting, but it kind of hit me walking in just how much work goes into a nursery. If you think about every single individual plant in these seed trays will eventually need to be picked out and then put into their very own containers. There's something about being in the space and then physically just seeing it for yourself and knowing all the hard work that actually goes into us purchasing plants online or from a store. Dawn was showing me that actually at this stage the plants were ready to be potted on. Okay, confess in the comments below if you thought that actually there would be loads of, I don't know, tanks or pools or something where the seeds would be growing. I did not expect there to be tons of seed trays.
Dawn and the team here have been so lovely. They've even given me some seeds, so I'm going to be showing you how to grow some pond plants from seed later on this season.
I was literally like a child in a candy shop. There was so much. It took a while to figure out which plants I wanted to select, so I don't know how Dawn does it. Now, this nursery is pretty young, so I wanted to find out more from Dawn about how the nursery got started and their connection to the show garden world.
Fast forward to here, we're sat at the Chelsea Flower Show. So how did you get from the nursery into making show ponds at some of the biggest shows in the country?
So we started off by me buying my son a stand at Harrogate Flower Show. So he had no choice, because I said if you want to get out there and people to know who you are, you've got to start doing some shows. So that's how it started. Then we went and we got seen at the other shows and got invited then to come to the RHS and to BBC Gardens World.
Amazing. And talk us through the design here, because this seems to be a little bit larger than the pond that I saw when I came to visit you last year. In fact, that one looked about half the size of this.
It was less than half the size of this. This is 3 times the size we normally do. So 100 square metres this is. Absolutely huge. 10,500 litres of water, which they are going to drain down a little gully at the far end of this nursery. We decided to do it as 2 separate ponds with a bridge across the middle, because then people could actually immerse themselves into the pond. Rather than just seeing it from the outside and looking in, you can actually see it from all angles.
And I think I absolutely love that, but I also love the height and the structure that you've managed to get into here, because it's not all level. So was that all part of the plan?
So for me, when you look at people's ponds, everything always seems so flat. They always have water lilies in there, there's no height or anything. And there are so many plants that you can put in that actually give it a bit of structure. The one problem people have is if they put anything with any height into a pond, they have the problem if the wind blows, the pots fall over and everybody gets annoyed with all the pots falling over. So the best thing to do is get a bigger pot, just fill it with pea gravel, plant into the pea gravel, which then gives you that stability. And if the wind blows, taller plants will stay upright.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And so you got all of this height in this show pond, but this is something that you advise people to do in their actual ponds to get all of this height and structure in.
So what you want to do is you want to add a bit of feature to your pond, a bit of architecture, so it can still be for wildlife. So anything emergent, so all the tall plants that are coming out of your pond are ideal for your dragonflies and for your newts, but all your lower growing stuff is ideal for your frogs. So the more height you've got, the more you're going to encourage more wildlife in. So therefore all your birds will come, bees will come to it all.
And speaking of dragonflies, I've noticed for the first time ever seeing one of your show ponds, there's some form of structure here.
Sculpture! Yeah, we only found that 2 weeks ago. It's a guy that's only been doing sculpturing for 3 years. So he's called Steve Davis, and we saw him at Malvern, and as we walked round, we just saw his sculpture there and we asked him if we could borrow it. It is absolutely amazing because I've seen other sculptures and I've been offered other sculptures, but they tend to look a bit tacky in a pond. And you've got to get the right sculpture to make it look classy enough, I think.
And I think what I also love is the fact that you as a company, you're really focused on bringing wildlife into our ponds. And so I know that you have newt packs and that you have dragonfly packs. So it's really fitting actually that your main sculpture and your first ever sculpture in a pond is a dragonfly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's stunning. And he's also done it exact to scale.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. And also, I do know a few of our viewers today have got some of my container ponds, which of course you supply. So thank you from all of us for supplying all of our plants and this fantastic display.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, a lot of work goes into making an exhibit here, and I wanted to find out a little bit more from Nursery to see what actually is the process. We're going to go over and meet Ian, who is the head gardener at Peter Beales Roses, to find out a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes.
Hello, I'm Ian Limmer from Peter Beales Roses. I've worked for the company now for 45, 46 years, something like that. I started as a Saturday boy, weeding and watering. I'm still doing that today at the moment, so I'm very much hands-on. My title is Nursery Manager. So I started actually when I was 15, 2 weeks before my 16th birthday, and within 6 weeks, Peter said to me, "Ian, would you like to come to Chelsea Flower Show?" And I was just blown away, you know, to be able to come to London, let alone, you know, the world's biggest flower show. So that was amazing. Here we are, nearly 47 years later, I'm still growing roses. We're delighted and honoured this year to introduce a rose for the RNLI. Well, my grandfather was a lifeboatman for 30 years, so it's quite close to my heart, you know, with the grandfather, you know, going out. I believe he saved 160 lives through his career, and he went out in the old rowing boats and then the sailing boats. So it was you know, it was straight away that I thought, let's contact the RNLI and see if we've got a rose that might suit them. So they came down and we showed them about 8 to 10 seedlings, and then they chose this beautiful one here, which was this sort of apricot orange fading to a sort of a lemon yellow or peachy yellow, and that picks out the rib of the boat of the first sort of colour, and then it fades to sort of the yellow of their life jackets. We're donating 20% of the takings from that, and over the next couple of years we're hoping to raise between £35,000 and £40,000 for the charity.
Talk us through this whole design process. What happens first? Do you have this idea with the RNLI first, or did you design the space first? How does it all begin?
Well, again, going back to 2021, and then they said, yes, you know, that would be lovely. So straight away, then you start thinking in your mind, how are we going to do it? Can we get a lifeboat? And can we have roses growing naturally over an arch, over the boat? Do you think we can have some roses that will flower and look a little bit like the sea? So all these things were going through our mind, and the RNLI said, I wanted a bigger one. I wanted the Atlantic 85, but they don't have many spare ones of those. And it took me about 3.5 months to get through the red tape, and rightly so, because they don't just turn around and say, yeah, we'll give you a boat or whatever. So that go through all the right procedures, which it did, and then finally they said, yes, you can have a boat. Well, that was fantastic. So, you know, that then gave us a platform then to say, right, okay, yeah, we can design, we'll have the arches, you know, we'll have oars. If you see the oars over there, I thought, well, that'd be lovely to have an obelisk, so roses can be climbing up the oars and just look natural, you know, coming, you know, instead of ironwork obelisks and so on. You know, we've got other arches at the back there. We start thinking about Chelsea Flower Show almost the day it finishes, you know, from the previous year. Then, around September time, it's usually my brother and myself sit down and design the stand. Then around October time, Michael, who brings all these roses on in the glass houses for us, we sit down together and we start planning and saying, right, we're going to have purple skyliner on this arch. We need about 20. On this arch, we're going to have so-and-so, so-and-so. So then in the winter, they're potted. There's 3,000 roses go into the glass houses in February to get 1,200 roses spot on for Chelsea Flower Show. So some go over a lot earlier and some just don't make it. So to get 1,200 spot on roses, you have to have about the 3,000 mark. So it's an awful lot of work, time, effort and money. You know, we've got Michael who does, you know, he does a lot of the breeding and bringing on the roses, you know, for Chelsea. He lives and breathes it 24 hours a day from really October. So,
and then nothing gets wasted, because in actual fact you can then sell them at your nursery.
Exactly. Oh yeah, nothing gets wasted. All these 1,200 roses, we're hoping on Saturday we'll sell quite a few. That helps cover the hotel bills, it helps cover fuel, etc., because it's very expensive to do Chelsea. Then the other, so we'll hopefully sell 300 or 400, and then the other roses then go back to the nursery. When we're tidying them up here, we give them what we call as the Chelsea chop. You chop them down, you just throw away the tops, and they go back to the nursery as a skeleton. And then normally by August, September time, they come out again for their second flush. We can sell another 300 or 400 of those. Then the rest that we don't sell, we bring on for the following Chelsea. So climbers and ramblers that are this height on these arches, by the end of September the following year, or that coming year, they're that height. So that we can then bring them on, and we'll use them for 3 or 4 years. So everything is rotated or sold or recycled to bring us back to where we are today.
There's one thing that I don't think you may remember, but in 2022 I did a balcony garden.
You did, out there. A very, very small balcony. And was it Chevy Chase or something like that?
Brilliant. Chevy Chase
Do you
and
know,
High
my
Rafa.
memory is so bad, but remember that. That's right. And you just wanted one rose that would help you. And I believe it did help you.
It really did. And what I wanted to tell you was that was the plant that stopped the Queen. And she stopped in front of my garden. She asked me to come and speak to her. And the first thing that she said was, I do quite like your roses. So I just wanted to
What
say
a connection,
thank you very
eh?
much. Yeah.
Isn't that brilliant?
Well, unfortunately, both of my roses unalived themselves, but it was my fault. So I'm going to have to come to the nursery to come and get some replacements. Can you tell us, where is your nursery?
Well, the nursery is in Attleborough, just 15 miles south of Norwich. So we're in between Norwich and Thetford on the A11, so it's easy enough to find. We've got lovely display gardens, probably about 2 acres display gardens, which are now coming out in flower now. And my brother, who's the head gardener there, is always at hand for giving help and advice. And honestly, it almost looks as though it's like a National Trust garden. And we don't charge anybody to come into the garden. You know, it'd just be lovely if people come along, have a cup of tea, have a cake, maybe buy a rose or another plant, because we do lots of other different plants at the nursery. And it's a joy to wander around, and we've got so many experts. We've got people like myself who've been there 30, 40 years with lots and lots of knowledge. So a destination to come to.
Oh, but I am looking forward to it. Hopefully I will see you very, very soon.
Thank you.
Now, as a balcony garden myself, I could not wait to see the balconies, and I was not disappointed. The first balcony I saw was called Tommy's Cuisine, the no bonsai garden, and this garden was all about no waste. Just like I do on my garden, this garden uses leaf litter as a mulch. The garden features home composting and also is a plastic-free balcony garden. The designers created a really beautiful space, and these wooden containers at the front have been planted to create a barrier which creates privacy along the garden. It's giving tranquil woodlands.
My name is Michaela Trinca, and I've designed La Mia Venezia balcony garden for Chelsea Flower Show 2024. So I don't have a sponsor, and therefore I was able to choose my own brief. And so what felt comfortable to me was going back to my heritage. I'm Italian and I lived there. I had my childhood years in Italy, and I was maybe an hour away from Venice, so I visited Venice a lot. And so the brief says it's for a mature couple who enjoy travelling and they would like to recreate a slice of Venice on their balcony. To get a little bit of shelter from the direct sun, I've created a pergola which will create dappled shade. The clients have their own gardens, they can still see their own garden, they can see far-reaching views, and also from their other spaces, so from their garden or from neighbours, the view back is picturesque and it's almost like a romantic scene.
I think it's absolutely beautiful. What I love as well is how you've managed to age the water
Yes.
to really keep it in
Yes.
terms of the client. So how did you go about designing that back then?
So, started off as a little sketch of where I thought the placement of bricks would look good. I sourced some salvaged bricks, the right colours that I wanted. We created brick slips from them, and then we placed them on boards and then placed them on the wall, and then we rendered artistically on top. So there's two and a half layers of render on top, which we then were able to scratch off, sometimes with a bit of a paintbrush, we brushed it with a sponge. There was a few different processes just to make it look as natural as possible. And aged. And the same with the window frame and the door frame. Obviously, they are timber. We've tried to make it look like stone.
It's really awesome. And then what I noticed as well with your pagoda, it's not just a pagoda, there is a hanging element,
Yes.
a planted element. Can you talk us through that?
So, firstly, I wanted an overhead planter, and I wanted to have the overflowing plants, this kind of something that draws the eye up, but has more visual interest, just another space for plants, just to maximise the amount of space that you can create. The shape is 8-sided. It has a hole in the centre so you can see the sky right through, and another space for plants to come through. But the reason that it's that shape is that you'll find that a lot of piazzas in Venice will have water fountains or stonework. Sometimes they're drain covers that are that shape.
With the planting, I'm guessing the planting is drought tolerant. So
Yes. So the planting is Mediterranean inspired palette. Slightly English because we've got the rose. So it's a bit of a mix. But yes, all the plants here are quite happy. They will tolerate some drought, which I think is important with our changing climate.
I also noticed in terms of the watering and the drought tolerance side that your mulch is very different. It's not your standard mulch.
No. So I've got Aspidistra. That's just got a leaker, which is quite a standard interior plant thing to do. So I think the idea with that really is if you think in the winter, oh God, we're going to have a really, really cold week, you just bring that pot in. And you have it, you enjoy it as your indoor plant. The rest of the pots have got a mussel mulch, and so there's a mixture of crushed and then whole shells as decorative on top. And the thinking behind that was that in Venice they used to farm mussels, and I think that mussel shells can add calcium to the soil, so potentially it's also very good for the soil.
So you have some full shells and then some
Crushed, yes. There's crushed as a base layer, and then we've put whole ones on top so you can really see what it is, and it becomes a decorative element.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and I think we are going to be taking away quite a lot of ideas from this garden. It is really stunning. Good luck for the judging tomorrow.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, I'm Tom Bannister, and I have created this oasis called the Ecotherapy Garden.
Tell us more. What is the client brief? What's the story behind this garden?
The garden is for a professional gardener. As gardeners, we instinctively know how good it is to be gardening and how good that is for our health and mental well-being. And then recently, I've been reading quite a lot about cold plunge therapy, cold water therapy, and so I was trying to combine the two. So the gardener would be out working all day, and then they'd need a place to come home and rest their aching limbs.
I noticed it's not just the bath, there's lots of running water in this garden. Why was that important to you to include?
I think on top of like we've just mentioned, gardening, cold plunge therapy, sound is important to relax the mind, and that's also same with the colour scheme throughout. It's just a cool green garden, so it's calming.
So what's your style of planting?
Delicate, intricate. I think as the years go by though, I'm forever finding myself studying micro detail planting that's just naturalised, whether I'm walking around the city my hometown. I'm forever looking up close to native plants that have naturalised, like the mosses or the little geraniums. That's actually probably the thing that interests me the most. This garden, I think what's been nice about it is it's brutal in its hard elements, but it's also delicate at the same time.
Speaking of the city, what is the location on the client brief of this garden? Where is it to be found?
So it would be an inner city garden, whether that be in central London or central Manchester, any inner city location with a small courtyard. Often in London you might have a courtyard and you'd be surrounded by neighbouring buildings. And so these could be made modular. They're lightweight, they're about 50% of the weight of what they should be.
So the containers are all modular, so you can pick them all up. Okay.
Equally, it could be made in situ.
Amazing. So what are the containers made from?
It's a lightweight hypertufa. There's a coconut coir in there, a perlite. I think the interesting thing is we could replicate it on a large scale, or we could just make it in situ. If somebody was struggling for access, we could bring the materials in and make it that way.
I think you've got an absolutely stunner of a garden. I love looking at the reflections from the water. It's really stunning. You should be really proud of it.
I appreciate it, yeah.
No worries. Thank you so much.
All right.
Cheers.
My name's Mike Mcmahon from Mike Mcmahon Studio, and I have done this garden, the Adelshaw Goddard Junglet Garden, with my wife Julesy, who's also part of our studio.
Tell us, what is the theme behind this garden?
So the theme of this garden is a jungle, or a junglet as we call it, and it's the concept originally originated from our own balcony at King's Cross, which is actually smaller than this balcony, and the deck in the middle is a little bit bigger than what our balcony is. And so we've kind of transported that idea of having a jungle on a balcony to here. On our balcony, which is 2 by 1 square metre, we have a couple of tree ferns, tetrapanics, Musa bastu. We have so many different tropical plants. And the reason why we came to Chelsea is because we've noticed that all over the UK and Ireland, there's hundreds of thousands of empty balconies. And we just wanted to highlight that you can put, in this day of global warming, that we can put greenery on these balconies. And that even if it's just a single pot or a single tree, that you don't need to have a house and a garden to have a garden.
And then talk us through the planting of this garden. So we have the tree ferns, like you have on your own balcony, but I also see some nasturtiums and is that some fatsia? So what's the planting plan?
So the planting mirrors the 4 layers of the rainforest, from the canopy layer to the forest floor. So on the top layer we have the banana trees, we have the Dixonia antarctica tree ferns and the tetrapanics, and then kind of moving down we have plants like the Fatsia japonica and some really sculptural, exciting plants like a Brassioopsis mythus, which has this beautiful leaf. And there's a Chinese tulip tree in there with a leaf that looks a little bit like a sumo wrestler. And I just absolutely love exotic, exciting leaves and the drama that you get from them. But then moving down again, we have hostas. And when the light comes through, it just hits all these plants so magical. There's some really exciting plants in there, like the spotty dotty, which has a beautiful leaf. And then on the floor, like what most people on a balcony will just have your balcony with planters. We've planted the floor, so it's like a forest floor with mind your own business and other little floor with other little ferns. And when you look in there, all that's missing is a little deer. You could just imagine that there's a deer.
Especially with the planting on the floor, this might not be something that a renter could do, but if you are a homeowner, is this doable? Can you do this? Can you plant on the floor?
Yes, you can plant on the floor because on a lot of balconies there's enough depth because there's the structure below, but then they build up from that to have your finished floor. So below this there was 100 mil of space to your finished floor. So we use that space to plant in, and 100 mil is actually enough for some smaller plants. Well, you know, obviously with a tree you need a much deeper depth. And you know, when you ask, is it possible for somebody who's renting? Well, if somebody who's renting, you can put it into like little pots and things like that. So there's loads of different tricks and ways to achieve a similar goal.
Amazing. And now, I heard that your background is actually in architecture. So has that helped inspire your design a little bit?
I'd say you would say that it is heavily inspired by architecture because the back wall, which is very dramatic, is it also echoes the 4 layers of the rainforest. So it kind of folds in and out, and the pattern slightly changes.
I think it's awesome. And I think one of the things that I'm really conscious of is trying to get developers to get on board and thinking about their residents having access to outside space like balconies. Moving forward, do you think that this idea of architects putting the green space at the forefront is something that we're going to see more of?
I think this has to be central to any development to high-rise, because as the Earth's population gets bigger, there's less and less space, so the aspiration for everyone to live in a house and a garden will diminish. So if the population have to live in high-rise, we should try and create the best outdoor space that we can create. A bit that kills me is when I pass housing, especially social housing, and it's clear that there's not enough storage inside the house, and I see loads of suitcases on the balcony, and I think that is so unfair to whoever lives in there. Their bit of outdoor space is taken up with storage. So I think it's fundamental that we need to start increasing the size of the balconies, but also not just creating a balcony that is a rail and a deck, that we should start having planters built into the design so it's already there, and if the planter is built in, then all they have to do is put in a plant and then off they go. So I think that should be built into building regs, and then if we do that, then greenery will start to grow up and around a building.
I agree 100%. Thank you so much. Thank you for spending that time talking to us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm a huge fan of you and your work. So
thank you.
In the UK, we're dealing with intense droughts during summer, but also a lot of flooding during winter. If your garden regularly floods, what can you do?
My name's Naomi Slade. I'm a journalist, author and garden designer. Well, we're at Chelsea Flower Show, and this is the Flood Resilient Garden, which was designed by me and Ed Barsley, my co-designer, to give people lots of inspiration on flood resilience in small spaces. So the garden itself is really quite compact. It's 9 metres by 6, which is about the same size as a fairly normal urban garden. We set ourselves a brief. You do that if you're designing a garden at Chelsea, and it's a professional couple, an ordinary terraced house with an ordinary garden. They've been flooded before. What they want is a garden which is usable when it's wet or has been very wet, or when it's still raining, which is why you've got a raised deck here and a covered area above us. It needs to be bright, it needs to be vibrant, it's got to celebrate water. So rather than having that fear of being flooded again, you think, well, how can we use the water that lands on the roof? How can we enjoy it? And the planting scheme particularly, it's friendly, it's domestic scale. So we've got lots of plants like willows and like acers and all sorts of things, which are really quite easy to get hold of, but put in a beautiful design.
And do these plants work well in damp soil? Is that why you've selected some of these plants?
Well, what we've done with this garden as a demonstration is to extend the landscape by creating highs and lows. So you've got a mounded area and you've got a pond. So it's based on SUDS, Sustainable Urban Drainage Systems, but also good horticulture, which I think understanding gardens and gardening is going to be what gets us through the climate crisis insofar as we can. It gives us that agency so we can do things. So if you create a mound or lift things up, or in a smaller space, just create a raised bed, you end up, because water always runs downwards, you end up with a much more well-drained area. And things like fruit trees and roses and peonies, everybody loves them. And you think, well, if I've got a garden that's mostly soggy, then how can I possibly grow these things I love? The answer is lift them out of the water by any means.
So I also see that we've got quite a lot of water here. Are these water butts?
Well, we've got a water feature here, which is made from recycled old water tanks, and this we've had manufactured into a beautiful cascading water feature which traps the water from the roof so it's still in the garden. It doesn't flood your garden, it doesn't run off hard surfaces into the road and overwhelm the sewers and poison the surface at the end of the thing. And the overloading of sewers is a real issue. But if we can stop the water and keep it in our gardens by disconnecting our drain pipes and creating spaces for the water to go, we can all make a little step of progress in that sense. So these are a beautiful feature, but also it's a way of storing water to use in the garden later. And the other thing is we've got a smart water butt, and I think there's a real issue with water butts is everyone understands they're a good thing, but they're really ugly.
They're so ugly.
They're so ugly. I mean, I am well behind saving water. I do have a water butt. I don't love it. I have it because I need to have it. I wish I could have 10. I've got a very small garden at home. It's no bigger than this. So we've kind of redesigned a water butt again to match our galvanised tanks.
And how does the water butt work?
Well, when it rains, the water fills it up. But this is actually a smart water butt, so it's attached to technology which is attached to the weather forecast. So one of the issues with water butts is that when it rains, most of them are full already. We're very conservative as gardeners. We don't like to use water if we don't have to. We've got to save it for best. But actually, with this water butt, it can be programmed so that it will release water ahead of the rainstorm, which runs into the garden, it waters all the plants, it wets the soil. And if you think about how really dry soil water, when it rains, just runs off the top, and how wet soil absorbs it, it means you can actually use the soil to take up quite a lot of the water that falls out of the sky, and you've still got your resources there because it'll fill up again because it's empty.
How can we take elements of your garden and then implement them into our balconies, into our patios, into the courtyards?
Well, I think even in a balcony or a courtyard or a patio, you can still harvest water. You can, find some pretty way of collecting it. Even if you leave out a nice bucket and have that storage, you can still have a water feature. You can still have raised beds for that drainage. I mean, courtyards, they're very often shaded and they're often quite deep down. So they're often very damp places. But lifting things up, I mean, my garden, it's not so much a wet thing. My garden's increasingly wet. So I am starting to build a swale, a channel, a rain garden at the bottom, just to capture the water that goes through so it doesn't run into the lane at the back. So creating barriers, but also, as I've demonstrated in this garden, planting really densely. So you layer the plantings, so you've got layers of trees and layers of shrubs and layers of perennials. So every raindrop, it hits a whole set of leaves on the way down. It's a long time before it hits the ground.
Amazing, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a talk with us.
You're very welcome. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you. Now, the weather is absolutely atrocious right now, and everybody has been stuck here in the pavilion. But that has not been a bad thing at all, because I found a whole category here that probably doesn't get as much attention as it should. The category is called All About Plants, and as the title suggests, it is all about the plants. Now, often gardening can seem quite serious and sometimes quite boring, but I found a garden here in the Floral Marquee that's all about joy, it's about fun, and it's about colour. And there are loads of ideas in this garden that I think that we can pick up and put into our small spaces.
Now, often when we think about gardening, we think about straight lines and order. But this garden is the complete opposite. There are curves, there are bends, there is absolute chaos, and yet it somehow feels really, really cohesive. The garden's called the Pentathlon Joy Garden, and the garden does what it says on the tin. The designer, Penelope, really went out on the limb to work out how do you make a garden fun and quirky. She ripped up the rulebook and added in things like curves, bright bold colours, and a really incredible planting plan. And this is so easy to replicate in a container garden. If you want to add a little bit of joy to your garden, maybe all of your pots don't need to be the same colour and they don't need to be the same height. What you can do is switch things up, change your pots around, and then incorporate a really bold, colourful planting plan. And then maybe within your planting plan, think about how are you going to get a bit of height into your garden. Penelope has chosen trees that actually have a little bit of variation to the stems. They're not straight. In fact, Pentathlon is a young people's disability sports charity, and only 5% of young people with disabilities are in work. And so the 5 trees here represent that 5%. After the show, the garden is going to be relocated back to the charity, and you can just tell that the young people are going to really enjoy this space. I wanted to go outside and head over to one of the big show gardens and break that down for you, but child, Mother Nature had other plans.
You guys, it is absolutely chucking it down with rain out here at Chelsea, and my camera equipment is getting super wet. So we're not going to see any of the big show gardens today, I'm afraid. If you want that, you can go watch the live coverage. What we are going to do is we're going to go inside into the pavilion, and I'm going to go on the hunt and see what kind of things I can find to help us small space gardeners. So let's get going.
For me, the most striking and reflective garden happened to be this one. It was so far removed from joy. In fact, this garden is about grief and a place to stop and reflect and recollect your thoughts.
Hi, I'm Katherine Holland. I'm a garden designer, and this year I've worked with Sue Ryder to create the Sue Ryder Grief Pan Garden at RHS Chelsea Flower Show.
In terms of your client brief, what was your client brief? How did you go about designing this space?
So I wanted to make essentially a green hug that people could come and sit in and feel either safe to talk about their grief to other people, or it just gave them somewhere that they felt like they could just come and have a moment of reflection to think of a loved one that had died.
And how did your planting kind of reflect your client brief?
So I had feedback from hospice staff, hospice patients, inpatients, and also the sort of space that I could have done with when I was first grieved. And a lot of people said they wanted colour in the garden, but not necessarily overpowering colour, which is why I tried to have lots of different colour, but none of it is overpowering. It's not saying kind of like look at me. It all kind of just melds softly into one another.
And how did you go about doing that? Did you start off with a list of plants, or did you start off with a colour wheel?
So it was important to me, because this is being relocated to a hospice, I wanted to make a space that people could connect with in different ways. So it might be whether it's just something you look at and it's just like the interesting textures of leaves, or something that's tactile or fragrance, or gives you sound from either pollinating insects visiting or from grasses rustling in the wind. So I did a lot of research on like the different layers of the planting I could make up and how to go about creating like these different sensory experiences with the different plants.
And from what I remember, last year we saw you in the balcony container category.
That's right.
And so a lot of my viewers here, they are really interested in small spaces like balconies. So how can we take a beautiful garden like this and transform that into a container setting?
I think you can definitely do something on a smaller scale in containers. I mean, one of my tips last year, and what I would say to anybody who's got a balcony garden, is don't be afraid to use height. So get a lovely multi-stemmed shrub or a small tree and put it in a pot, because the height instantly makes a space feel bigger, and also having a bit of a canopy and something that's kind of a bit protective just instantly, I think it makes the space feel bigger.
I agree, and I think maybe incorporating some of your planting in terms of a milder, calmer, cooler colour palette could work as well.
Definitely, and I think when you've got a limited space, you want plants that are just going to perform for you throughout the year and will just keep on giving. So, for example, Nepetas are great. So catmint is brilliant for containers because it doesn't mind if it dries out a little bit. You can chop it back. You can do essentially a Chelsea chop. So you get a flush of flowers now, and then you cut it back, and then you get a load more flowers later in the summer.
You know, that is the second time today that we've heard Chelsea chop. So this is one thing that we are all going to be taking away from this whole video, is the Chelsea chop.
Exactly.
But I think you've got an absolutely stunning garden, and I think you should be really, really proud of yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, it hasn't sunk in yet, but I'm so thrilled. I'm so thrilled for the Sue Rider, and you know, hopefully it's going to really help people open up and have conversations. We've already had people coming to us today and just sort of telling us about someone that they love that has died, and how this space means something to them. And that's what this is about. It's about creating somewhere that sparks conversations and helps people feel that they can talk about their grief.
I think that's so, so important. Well, thank you so much for inviting us in. I know you've got an after-hours party to attend now, so I'm going to let you go.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now this video is slightly chaotic. I don't have an outro for you, but instead of an outro, what I do have are the show gardens. Just as I was leaving, the rain started to ease off slightly. So here's a whistle-stop look at some of the gardens. Now this was the Netflix Bridgerton garden, and my oh my, look at it. It is stunning. I now see why I couldn't get anywhere near this garden this morning. That's also one of my Chelsea top tips. Don't come too early, because let me tell you, you're not going to see anything. If you come in the afternoon, you'll have a higher chance of seeing some of the show gardens. Now this is the St James's garden. Imagine each one of these bricks was hand painted to age it up and make it look like it will fit into St James's Park.
I hope that you guys are really appreciating this. It is cold, it is wet, I have no umbrella. This is investigative journalism, okay?
Now this is a feature garden, and this feature garden is called Repurposed. Every single one of these big items and structures is repurposed from an old show garden. It was pulled out of storage in order to make this garden. How amazing is that? And that shows the RHS's commitment to sustainability.
So the light is beginning to fade right now. The rain is getting heavier and heavier, but what I really did want to do is show you some of these stunning gardens. Now these are called sanctuary gardens. They're actually smaller than the large show gardens, but on paper, once again, they may seem, a little bit of out of reach for some of us, but there's some really cool ideas in here. Look at how simple and beautiful the color palette is there. The light is fading, sorry guys. But everything marries together really, really well. And in terms of height, they've managed to get so much height and structure into the garden. And these are all principles that we can do in our own small spaces. Now, this garden behind me actually has containers. In fact, I learned today from Sue Kent that the containers are almost like Lego pieces, so you can mold them and shape them, stack them up as high as you need to, which makes this garden super, super accessible. So in actual fact, this garden is really about gardening in containers and finding ways to get a little bit of height in there by stacking up those containers.
I had the chance to enjoy this garden in the sunlight on day one of Chelsea, and I absolutely loved it. I regret not filming it at the time, but it was because I was just so absorbed by it. This is a shade garden. It's full of ferns and acers, and this is a Japanese designer who is just phenomenal. This garden is so intricate, so beautiful. And if you just walk past it, you'd think that this garden has been there for years. But in actual fact, it's 3 weeks old, if that. One key element of this garden that I love is the fact that there are so many different levels. It's not flat at all. And we can do the same thing in our small spaces by having containers at different heights and different levels. You can use bricks or wood to raise the height of our planters.
Now, this designer is an absolute master when it comes to detail. So things like the moss are all planted and stuck onto these rocks just to make it feel more aged. So although it looks like naturalized moss, everything has been put in there himself or his planting team, and that completely changes the overall feel of the garden. It's absolutely spectacular. It's such a shame that it is nighttime and you can't see it properly.
I hope that you've enjoyed hanging out with me today, and hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Now, my next show is going to be Gardener's World Live, so I cannot wait to take you along on the journey. Hopefully I will see you all again very, very soon. Bye!